words while I can to welcome Vishna and Saran here to Canberra. I much admire what young people like these two young men can do when they set their mind to making a very important point and putting themselves out to the degree necessary to get that point across. I understand they've got a couple of badly swollen ankles to show for their efforts, but they're in no doubt that what they've done has been very important in drawing attention to a very important issue. The end of the at least one phase of the armed conflict in Sri Lanka between the government and the Tamils has unfortunately only marked the beginning of another phase, which has, by all reports, led to some very serious abuses of human rights. I think everybody who has watched with concern the conflict in Sri Lanka over recent years would now be concerned that despite that ending of that first phase, that there is now a very serious prospect of continued very serious breaches of human rights. And nobody who has observed that process would regard that very lightly. The answer to what is apparently going on in Sri Lanka at the moment is to draw attention to what's occurring, to make sure that people are aware that the apparent end of armed conflict should not mean that we cease to have an interest in what's happening in Sri Lanka, or that things have now settled down, quote unquote. They clearly haven't. The reports of what's being done to people in camps around Tamil areas in Sri Lanka is extremely concerning, and no Australian, nobody in the world should take lightly those reports. We need to be prepared to be vigilant, to watch carefully what is going on, to ask questions about how the Sri Lankan government is treating people who've been displaced, who've lost their homes, who are in distress, who are in need of food and medical attention, and we need to ensure that that level of vigilance results in action by the government of Sri Lanka to deal with these issues. I'm particularly concerned that Australian aid is able to be effective and plentiful in reaching those people who are genuinely most in need at the moment, and clearly those are people in those camps who have been denied a great deal that was theirs previously. I hope that Saran and Vishna will succeed in raising the awareness of all Australians about what's happening in Sri Lanka. I know they've already done a huge amount to be able to do that, and I thank them for taking their message to so many people throughout New South Wales and the ACT over these last few days. It's a small step in one respect, but it really does raise people's understanding, and at the end of the day, if we don't understand, we can't act. If we aren't aware, we can't take decisions. We need to do that, and these two young men have helped that to happen. And I thank them very much for their efforts to make that occur. So well done, guys.
Look, I just have to say I agree wholeheartedly with everything that Senator Humphries has said. I think you're very brave young men to be doing what you're doing, and I think with this sort of act, it speaks louder than words. Very much by doing something like this, it draws attention to the plight of the 300,000 refugees in Sri Lanka, and as Senator Humphries has said, who are living in absolutely appalling conditions. And I think with this, it makes it even more so, given that they're innocent people who've been caught in a conflict and are now being treated even more appallingly. And I think what we should be doing as governments all around the world should be pushing for and supporting the calls from groups like Amnesty International. So I think even more than just bringing attention to the issue, we should actually be supporting and really very much being very vocal about what Amnesty is saying in terms of opening up the camps to let people go if they wish to do so, to make sure that the military no longer control the camps, that it's civilians that are controlling the camps, that aid agencies are allowed to go in, that the media is allowed to go in, and that human rights observers are also allowed to go in. I think at a bare minimum that's what should be happening. But It is absolutely appalling which is happening. I think we saw those pictures when the conflict was occurring, and I have one very vivid memory that stuck in my head. It was an old woman who was being carried across water, and it was just absolutely heartbreaking to know that people are now trapped in that camp, aren't allowed to leave, and are living in conditions which are just absolutely appalling. It's something which we, as government and as people around the world, can't let this happen. So I'm not going to say too much because, again, I think what you are doing speaks louder than any words that anyone can actually say. It's extremely brave what you have done, and I absolutely admire and commend your commitment to this, and thank you for doing it. And I hope that everyone pays attention to it, and that we can actually get some change in Sri Lanka, and that, as I said, that the media, that human rights observers are allowed to go in, aid agencies are, so that we can put an end to what is going on in those camps. So thank you.
Thank you.